Yeah, that's true.
Candace, if I could weigh in on your question about whether we would define the word compelling,
go right ahead.
there would be no need to, because the states would decide whether there is a compelling need or not. It would not have to be defined. It would be defined by the mood of the country at the moment.
Okay, so Barack Obama, for instance, like he already did, gets a wild hair to go invade Syria like he did Libya. He would have to come to the states to get the money, or? If
the National Debt Relief Amendment were in place, the federal government would have to do what every other entity in this country has to do. Every state, every city, every county, every parish, every township, every individual, every corporation, every small business. You have to analyze, what is your budget? How much money do we have, and what are we going to do with it? And we have to have a contingency plan. In the state of North Dakota, we have a $350 million budget stabilization fund, also known as the Rainy Day Fund. We are prepared for unexpected things that can come along across anyone's horizon. And if the National Debt Relief Amendment were in place, part of Congress's duty would be to plan ahead, budget, have a contingency fund in place for the unforeseen. So in that scenario that you just mentioned, the federal government would need to have a contingency fund to deal with a need to engage in military action.
Candace,
I would sure like to. Well, hang on just a second. I'd like to see the federal government have a contingency plan for anything. It's ridiculous how they just keep making more. Yeah, they just keep making more and more programs, more and more departments, spending more and more money. So that's why I'm so intrigued by this Article 5 Amendment Convention. It just is fascinating. Okay, Brad, go ahead.
I was going to say, let me enlarge upon that, and I'm sure that North Dakota has the same kind of situation. Utah has a rainy day fund. Now, as you've been aware, the last couple of years, the revenues have been way down. Tax revenues have been way down, and yet we still have to keep our schools open. We still have to keep roads being built. We still have to have a police force and courts and all of that stuff. And so we've certainly found areas to cut because, unlike the federal government, we still have to balance our budget. But there's some necessary services that need to be maintained. And so we've been able to draw down that rainy day fund in order to keep those vital services intact without increasing any taxes. I'm sure that Senator Olafson could say the same thing about North Dakota. And yet you look at the federal government level. Let me just give one aspect of it. Social Security, just for example, has been in surplus for decades, and they have what they call a trust fund. Now that trust fund is two lies in two words. There's no trust because there's no money in it, and there's no fund because it's nothing but bonds in it. In other words, what they've done is they have a surplus coming in from Social Security taxes, and they immediately take that excess money and put it into the general fund and put a worthless piece of paper in the Treasury saying that, yeah, well, there's a trust fund there. And so instead of having a rainy day fund just in that one vital area of retirement, that one promise they've made to people, instead they have this fictional paper there. And so it is contingent upon us that we force the federal government to behave in the same fiscally responsible way that we as individuals and we as states have had to behave forever.
That would be nice. Senator, do you want to add anything?
Well, yes, the federal government functions so much differently than the states do. And of course, we are very fortunate here in North Dakota. Actually, we have not had a decline in revenues. We have had a big budget surplus each of the last 3 legislative sessions. And so we have enjoyed great success here. And one of the reasons is because we do things very differently than they do in Washington. I was in Washington, D.C. in May of 2010. And of course, North Dakota has become very well known around the country for our financial security and soundness. And so I had about 6 or 8 conversations that went something like this. Oh, you're from North Dakota. We hear your economy is doing real well out there. And I said, yes, it is. In fact, if you would let us come to Washington, D.C. and do some tutoring here for about 2 weeks, we could show you how to do what we're doing. And they said, well, what's the secret to your success? And I said, it's 2 things. It's very simple. Number one, we don't spend money we don't have. And number two, we haven't raised taxes. We've cut taxes and put over $1 billion back into the hands of our taxpayers. And some of those people on that East Coast and that Beltway, when I would tell them that, their eyes would glaze over, their brows would furrow, and you could tell that they couldn't grasp either one of those concepts. Don't spend money you don't have, don't raise taxes. That was so foreign to them that they couldn't grasp those concepts.
I'm not sure they ever will.
We get it here in Utah.
Yeah. Okay. Representative Daw, let's take a look at what obstacles stand in the path of this convention. What are you guys facing right now?
Well, what we have here in Utah is we have a very active John Birch Society and kind of by extension Eagle Forum, although when I talk to individual Eagle Forum members, they're at least very conflicted on the matter. There's not quite the unanimity, boy, I can't say that word, that there is with the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society, this idea that an Article 5 convention is some sort of constitutional self-destruct button it's a completely ingrained article of faith with them. That was one of their tenets starting out their society with, and it's something they won't back away from. One of their favorite quotes, in fact, is a quote that is completely taken out of context, just to give you an idea of how entrenched this is. And I tried to bring this up with them, and they their eyes just glass over. But anyway, without getting into the quote, and I will if you want me to, they just absolutely believe that holding an Article 5 convention is the same as holding a whole brand new constitutional convention. I said that word again, but in context. And they believe that it would be basically a wide open door to completely rewrite the Constitution. I don't believe that. I've never believed that. And if you read Article 5 just on its face, it's very clear that that is not true. But, trying to convince people that have held this as almost a religious tenet for decades is a formidable obstacle. It's one that we're having to work on. We're having some success, but that's why we want to come on shows like yours to try to get the word out and educate people about why a lot of what they're hearing is in fact a myth and exaggeration. And what it's done is it's really hamstring the states from using the tool that was very clearly and explicitly given to them by the founders of the Constitution to use in just this circumstance to push back against the federal government.
And Candace, if I could weigh in on that as well.
Please do.
This fear of an Article 5 convention is common, and because people have been lectured for years that we can't use that. But let me walk you through the steps that would need to happen in order for an Article 5 convention to produce a bad result. First of all, the first protection against a runaway Article 5 convention is the fact that 34 states need to come together, amass a tremendous amount of political will all across the country for a proposed amendment. And in the case of the National Debt Relief Amendment, the resolution is specific that the convention is limited to that one idea. So here you have the collective will of 34 states amassed together, and the convention is convened. Now, why would anyone think that the delegates who the state legislatures have chosen to attend that convention would all of a sudden collectively develop insanity and amnesia, thumb their nose at their legislature back home, and vote to open it up to the consideration of any and all crazy ideas? But let's say, for the sake of argument, that they did that, just to continue down what would need to happen for this to fully develop. At that point, court action would be filed to declare the convention null and void because it has exceeded the scope and call of the convention. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that the courts have developed amnesia and insanity, and they rule that the convention can go forward. So the convention goes forward. The next thing that would have to happen is the delegates would have to actually agree to a dangerous, radical, or extremist amendment. But let's say, because they went crazy in the first place and opened up the convention to the consideration of any and all ideas, that they do agree to some crazy, wild idea. Then the next thing that should happen is Congress has a ministerial capacity to take the results of a convention and send it back to the states for ratification. It's simply a secretarial capacity, but they do have the power to say that we cannot send this back to the states for ratification because you've gone beyond the scope and call of the convention. But let's say Congress has gone crazy and developed amnesia and insanity. Which of all these groups I'm mentioning would be the most likely? But let's say they don't care and they send it back to the states for ratification. Now, here comes the ultimate protection, the ultimate safety valve against the adoption of an extremist, radical, or dangerous amendment. 38 states must ratify the results of any convention, and unless and until 38 states ratify a proposed amendment, the Constitution is untouched and nothing changes. So I always have a challenge for those who want to promulgate fear-mongering over the Article 5 process. I ask any organization or organizations in particular, but I even ask individuals to do this. If you are going to preach to everyone that we should not have an Article 5 convention and we should fear it, produce for me your official list of 38 states that you fear would ratify an extremist, dangerous, or radical amendment. And of course, they are completely befuddled at that point because they don't have a list and they can't come up with one.
That's a good thing to address. Brad, what do you think you're going to be able to see with using an argument like that with our people here in Utah? Brad, are you there? Brad?
I'm sorry, I turned my mic off. There's a little bit of noise in here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I turned my mic off for a sec. You know, if I can get in front of people who are willing to sit down and listen to reason, I can convince them almost every time. The fact is, you look at the history of how Article 5 was drafted, you look at several write-ups and legal analysis of Article 5, and then you go through the very well-spoken step-by-step process that Senator Olafson just walked us through, and it's very clear that Article 5 was meant to be used, and it was not ever meant to be a constitutional kill switch. And so all I need to do, and what my challenge is to get in front of enough people, delegates, legislators, and other people, and convince them that this is the way it is, and this is the way it needs to be, and this is why we need to do it. And so that again is where we need to go. It's not a trivial thing to do, but that really is the whole point of what we need to do, is just educating everybody about why Article 5 needs to be used and when it needs to be used, and that now is the time is right, and this National Debt Relief Amendment is the ideal amendment to use Article 5 with.
Okay, tell me this, gentlemen. Who's driving this? I mean, is there a leader with this Article 5 Amendment Convention, or is it just a bunch of states getting together?
No, Candace, our effort is very, very well organized by restoringfreedom.org, and I am the national spokesman for the effort. We have a network of people around the country, good people like Representative Daw, who are taking the effort seriously in their state and advancing the National Debt Relief Amendment. We are very well organized and ready to engage the National Debt Relief Amendment in the 34 states, and we will keep going until we have 34 states. I'm very confident that in the next year we will add a number of additional states, and in 2013 there are more states that will be going into session, and so this is not an effort that is just by happenstance around the country. We are organized and we are having regular conference calls, and so it is a well-organized effort.
Let me ask this. Cannot these states that are going into session in 2013, can't they call a special session to address this?
States could pass a resolution any time they wanted to. It's up to the state legislature. All they have to do is pass a joint resolution with the language that has been spelled out in the National Debt Relief Amendment. Again, with the safety checks and the narrow scope that Senator Olafson has talked about. They could do that any time that they choose to.
Okay, Senator.
Yes.
All right, so this organization is driving the entire thing. What kind of response have you had from the senators and congressmen in Washington, D.C.?
Well, that's an interesting question, and you know what? We are there is no point in us talking to them because this is not an idea that they will like. And people have said to me, well, why don't you use the other method? Why don't you have Congress propose this? And that will never happen because Congress will never vote by a 2/3 vote of both chambers to limit their own ability to borrow and spend money. It won't happen. So we know that we have to use the state-initiated effort to do this. And speaking of, Congress has no role in the process other than a secretarial capacity to convene the convention. They specify the time and place. Then the convention is a convention of the states. Congress has no control over it. When the convention concludes, if there is agreement on a proposed amendment, Congress has, again, a secretarial duty to send that to the states for ratification. So we are not spending any time or effort on talking to representatives or senators in Washington, D.C. I would like to add a comment to our earlier discussion about the fear of a runaway convention.
Okay, hang on just a second, Senator. Okay. You said that if at this convention you guys get this amendment ready to go, it goes to Congress for a secretarial purpose. Is there any way it can get to the secretarial desk and die there?
No. That would be immediately challenged in court if they did not perform their duty, and it would be a successful challenge. They would be forced to send it to the states for ratification.
Okay, now go to the runaway convention.
What I was going to add about the runaway convention is this, or the runaway convention fear. We have a runaway convention ongoing before our eyes each and every day in this country. We have had a $780-some billion stimulus bill. We have Obamacare. We have TARP. We have $15 trillion in debt. We have a runaway Congress right before our eyes. So what is there to fear from getting involved in a state-initiated effort? Who do you trust more, Congress or the state legislatures?
Oh, that's simple.
The government closest to the people.
Yes, absolutely. Well, all right, gentlemen. So we've got the people who fear a constitutional convention, not understanding that this is a Article 5 amendment convention. So then we also have people. We've got certain states that I know this would never fly in, but are there enough states that would understand that the power has to return to the states, that the 10th Amendment has been violated every which way but loose? Are there enough of them to get the job done?
Well, I would say, Candace, that what people have to recognize is that, first of all, the National Debt Relief Amendment is a nonpartisan effort because the federal debt is a bipartisan problem that will require bipartisan solutions. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, we all have to acknowledge that the debt has increased under both parties. We all have to acknowledge that the course we are on is unsustainable, and we can be equally as concerned over the rapidly increasing federal debt for very different reasons. Someone in one part of the political spectrum might say, look, the course we're on is unsustainable, and if we keep going down this road, we are not going to have the money available to fund our precious social programs or to fund the size and scope of government that we believe is appropriate based on our political convictions. Someone on a different part of the political spectrum might say, look, the course we are on is unsustainable, and we are going to stymie job growth and kill our economy, and we're going to have a tax increase. And there you have two diametrically opposed political views, but both can be equally concerned about the crushing and unsustainable level of federal debt.
And they are. I mean, that's what brought about the Tea Party movement. It was people from both parties, well, all parties actually, who just were growing increasingly concerned, not to mention angry about what was going on in Washington, D.C. And everything that you added, you can add QE1 and QE2, and the fact that they're bandying about a QE3. So I can't see any reason not to go this route, not to go for the national debt amendment. Brad, can you tell me where we go from here?
Well, I'll tell you what we've done here in Utah, Candace. I opened this bill file and I ran this resolution last year, but I didn't really lay the groundwork like I should have, and we were defeated on a tie vote in committee. We had the John Birch Society and the Eagle Forum out in force, and we didn't have enough people supportive of this amendment there to counteract them, and I think it scared off a couple of votes on the committee. All we needed is one more vote to go our way, and we'd have got it to the floor of the House. But
well, my goodness, why didn't you call me?
Well, I'm calling you now.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll get you and your peeps out this session, won't we?
Yes, we will.
Anyway, we're laying a lot of groundwork this time. We're going on radio shows. We're going to write editorials. We're going to get in front of delegates. We're going to have town halls. We've got a lot of education to get out there. We make a very compelling case. It's very clear if you look at the historical evidence, if you look at just the simple wording of Article 5, if you walk through the process, this idea of a runaway convention just as simply is a fallacy. And so we need to get that word out, and I believe if we do, we can be successful this time.
Okay, well, let's get the job done. Senator Olafson, what do you need? Yes, absolutely. What do you need from us in order to get this through the other states that will do? I mean, there's no way Massachusetts or California will ever go for it, but I think you're right. I think there are enough states to pull this together. What do you need from the people of America to get this pushed through? Senator? Brad, why don't you take that question? We'll see what's going on with Senator Olafson.
Think the first and foremost thing that we need is, yes, the first and foremost thing that we need is for people to...
Are we losing? We're losing the... You know what, I think...
I'm losing both of you now. I've got you both on here.
Okay, I like your picture better than yours, by the way, Brad.
Okay, I can hear both of you. Gentlemen.
Okay. Your question about... Yes, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Candace, can you?
Okay, I'd like to respond to your question about what do we need to do.
Okay, yes, please do.
And the most important part of this process is that people get educated about Article 5, what we can do with it and why we need to use it. I firmly believe in my research of the Founding Fathers that they intended that we as state legislators would understand that not only do we have a right to use Article 5 when we see problems that exist at the federal level that are not being addressed by our federal officials, not only do we have a right to use it, but we have a duty to use it. And I think it's important that people need to educate themselves about the Article 5 process first and foremost. And the most important factor that we have in any state in terms of having success in passing the National Debt Relief Amendment is to have a strong prime sponsor who becomes educated on Article 5 and the National Debt Relief Amendment and will work to get people comfortable with Article 5 in their home state and explain why we need to use it and why we can use it safely. And so we are very pleased to have Representative Daw in that capacity in the state of Utah. And I'm confident with his leadership, we will be successful in Utah, and we are developing this kind of network of strong prime sponsors in many other states. We have several excellent prime sponsors in many of the states we are working in, and we're working to develop more. So that is the combination. Educate the public about Article 5 and have a strong prime sponsor in each state who can articulate the message and make people comfortable with Article 5, which they certainly should be, and they do become comfortable with Article 5 once they do a bit of basic education and research and logical thinking.
Okay, Senator, where can they go for this research? What is your website, and is there information on there to help them become educated?
Absolutely. I would encourage your listeners to go to restoringfreedom.org. There's an excellent base of information there on Article 5 and the National Debt Relief Amendment itself. Also, if you go to the Goldwater Institute website, there is a page on Article 5 there, which provides a lot of good information. I believe it's goldwaterinstitute.org/Article 5 with a V, Roman numeral V. I believe that is the site, but if you go to the Goldwater Institute site and search for Article 5, it'll take you right to the page.
Okay, that's good to know, everyone. So go to restoringfreedom.org, and that's where you can begin to educate yourselves on Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, which is the basis of this entire interview. Brad, is there any one last thing you would like to tell the listeners of Turning the Tide?
You know, I would just encourage them to study it for themselves, to understand that this is absolutely important that we use this. And, you know, if I could, Candace, I just want to talk about what's in the Declaration of Independence. It's got so many wonderful phrases in there, but one of them that I like is it talks about when a government becomes overly tyrannical or overly powerful, it is our duty to change that government. And I think in that case, they were talking about throwing off the British yoke. In this case, I think we're talking about throwing off the entrapment of crushing debt, and throwing off the entrapment of a federal government that basically operates through excessive power of the purse. We need to stop that. We need to stop it now.
So to be very clear, this isn't about the overthrow of the federal government. It's just to give it a little more self-control provided through the states.
We do not want to overthrow the federal government at all. We want to provide restraint for them. We have a fabulous system in place. It was put in place by our founding fathers, and we need to get back to that system that was put in place.
Okay, Senator Olafson, your last message to the listeners
Yes.
of Turning the Tide.
I would like your listeners to personalize this and think about why this effort is important and why the federal debt is an issue that we must address. Personalize this and think about the future generations in your family, your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews. I have a little 2-year-old grandson. He has not cast a vote, and he has not signed a mortgage, but our generation is incurring incredible levels of debt that we are going to pass along to his generation, and it will be a burden for their generation. It is wrong, and we must take action now to make it right. A runaway Article 5 convention is a myth. A $15 trillion federal debt is a reality staring us in the face each and every day. We must act now for our future generations.
That is absolutely wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. I would like to have you both back on in just a few months to see how this is going. And then, of course, you're both welcome to contact me if there's something that needs to be discussed on the air. So thank you to Representative Brad Daw and Senator Curtis Olafson, respectively, from Utah and North Dakota. And by the way, Senator, my little sister lives in North Dakota.
Oh, really? Where does she live?
She lives in Rugby.
Oh, okay. I'm not too far from there. So what does she do there, if I may ask?
Oh, she runs a family corporation that she runs from home, and we combine all of our skills and talents. There's 12 kids, and we seek out work all across the nation, and it's all coordinated through her.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Yeah, she's wonderful. Brad knows her.
Yeah, that's Crystal, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah. We've had some great Facebook conversations. I really enjoy her.
Oh, she's got a brilliant constitutional mind, no question. Okay, gentlemen, thank you. Have a wonderful evening. And again, everybody go to restoringfreedom.org. Learn more about Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution and get behind an Article 5 Amendment Convention. Contact your local representatives, your local senators. Send them to that website. Have them get in contact with Senator Olafson and let's get this baby moving and get the job done. We have got to get the constraints put on the federal government. They're going to send us right over the cliff of economic despair, and this is something that we as the American people cannot allow. So again, that is restoringfreedom.org. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Curtis, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Candace.